In this video, I'm going to teach you step by step how to build the Power BI reports you see behind me. You can download the files from the link in the video description so you can have a go yourself. Now, if the pace is too fast, click on the cog icon in the bottom right of the video and you can alter the speed settings. And of course, you can pause and rewind and watch as many times as you like. Okay, let's get started. First, I want to give you a very quick overview of what Power BI is. It's a business analytics tool for visualizing and sharing insights. We can get data from hundreds of sources using the same Power Query tool that's available in Excel. We then model the data with the same Power Pivot tool that's also available in Excel. And from there we create compelling interactive reports and dashboards and collaborate and share them with people inside and outside of our organization. We can set them up to automatically refresh so there's no further maintenance required. Now, there are two main Power BI tools. We use the free Power BI desktop tool to get data, model it, and create the reports. We then publish our reports to the online Power BI service where we can collaborate and share them with our audience. Now, the data I'll be working with is 12 months worth of budget and forecast data and 6 months worth of actual data for the IT department of a global company. And this is a modified dataset from Obviance. The forecast, budget and actual data is stored in CSV files that have been exported from an accounting system and they're saved on my PC. You can see the files contain records by date, department, cost element, country and the amount. And these are my fact tables. I also have an Excel file containing dimension tables that contain further groupings for the cost element, country and IT departments. Each table is named and these names will also be the names of the tables when I import them into Power BI. Now, I'll be comparing performance against budget or plan, if you prefer to call it that. And because these are costs, an adverse variance will be when actual or forecasted costs are higher than budget. Now, for those statisticians who might be thinking that variance is the wrong term to use here, I just want to clarify that this is a term accountants use to refer to the difference between a budgeted value and the actual value. Okay, I'll switch over to Power BI and we'll get started. Power BI Desktop is the free modeling tool available for Windows for authoring your Power BI reports. It uses the same Power Query and Power Pivot tools that we have in Excel. So if you're familiar with these tools, then you're off to a head start. Here, the Power Query tools are on the Home tab of the ribbon. And for those not familiar with Power Query, this is the Get and Transform data tool built into both Excel and Power BI. It enables you to get data from a huge range of sources and clean and transform it before loading it to the Power Pivot model. Now, my dimension tables are in an Excel file, so I'll grab them first. We'll connect. All I need to do is browse to the file location, select it and click Open. The navigator shows me a list of tables and sheets in the file. I want these 3 tables, so I'll check each one. In the right hand side we get a preview of the data so you can check that it's what you're expecting. And if I need to, I can click the Transform Data button to clean the data before loading it. However, in this case I know the data is ready, so I'm going to click Load. And Power BI is going to load that data into the Power Pivot model. We can now see the tables in the field pane ready for me to build my visuals, but first I need to get the rest of the data. I'll grab the CSV files for budget and forecast. There's budget. I get a preview of the data, and if I need to, I can clean the data by clicking Transform. At this screen we can see that Power Query has detected the file origin, but we can choose a different one. It's also detected the delimiter and it's based that on the first 200 rows, and again we can choose a different option here. I'm happy with these options, so I'm going to leave them as is. I can clean the data by clicking Transform Data, but I know this data is ready to go, so I'll click Load. Let's do the same for the forecast. And we'll load it straight in. Next I need to get the actuals. Now each month's data is in a separate file and you can see a list of them here. So I need to consolidate them into a single table. I'm going to just copy the address for the folder path, and in Power BI I need to get data and then more And here I want to get data from a folder. Click Connect. Now I can browse to the file location, but remember I've already copied it, so I'm just going to Ctrl+V to paste it in. Click OK. Power Query is showing me a list of the files in that folder and some metadata about those files. I'm going to combine and transform data so that you can see the Power Query editor. Similar to the CSV file, we get a preview. It's detected the file origin, the delimiter, and it's based that on the first 200 rows of the first file, but we can choose a different one here. The first file's fine for this example. I'm going to click OK. Power Query opens in a separate window, and here I can clean and transform the data before loading it to my model. On the left, you can see the list of queries I've created so far. The helper queries at the top are automatically created by Power Query for me when I combined the CSV files for the actuals data. On the right is the list of steps in the selector query, which we can see here is actuals. Now I don't need the first column in this table, it contains the file name. Now sometimes this column can be handy if you need to extract information from the file name, like maybe the date, but I already have a date column, so I'm just going to hit the delete key and we'll get rid of that column. Now if I wanted to filter out any data, for example, if I only wanted to analyze data for the United States, I could deselect everything and then just select USA, and that would filter the data before loading it to my data model. And that's important because you don't want to be bringing in data that you're not going to use. It's just going to make your file bigger than it needs to be. Now I want all of the countries, so I'm just going to cancel that. Now there's a whole load of easy to use tools for cleaning and transforming data available in the ribbon, many of which I cover in my Introduction to Power Query video, so I won't cover them again here, but there's a link to that video in the video description. Okay, I'm ready to load this data to my Power Pivot data model in Power BI. So on the Home tab, I can simply hit Close and Apply. You can see in the Fill pane that I now have all my data ready to work with, but first I need to make sure the relationships between the tables are set up correctly, and I like to do this in the model view. I'll rearrange the tables so that my fact tables are at the bottom and my dimension tables are at the top. This way I can easily see the filter direction arrows on the relationship connector lines all flow down from the dimension tables to the fact tables. Hovering over a connector line highlights the related fields. Now these relationships were automatically set up for me when I loaded the tables to the model, but if required I can double click the line and open the Edit Relationship dialog box where I can make changes. I'm happy with this one, so I'll leave it as is. Now one thing I notice here is the Departments table only has one relationship with the Actuals table, but it's missing relationships between the budget and forecast, and that's probably because the column name in the budget and forecast tables is spelt slightly differently. And that's fine, I can create those relationships now. Just left click and drag and release it on top of the field that it corresponds with. And we'll do the same for forecast. And now our relationships are all set up. Now the last table I need is a calendar table, and this isn't strictly required for every model, but because I have 3 fact tables and I want to visualize data from each table in a single visual, I need a dedicated dimension table that contains a list of dates, one for every day of the calendar or fiscal years that I want to report on. Now I can create this table in Power Query, or in Power BI I can use the calendar or calendar auto DAX functions. By the way, these functions aren't available in Power Pivot in Excel. So to create a table from a function, I'm going to go to the Data view, and then on the Table Tools tab, I can choose New Table. Here I just need to give my table a name, which will be Calendar, and I'm going to use the Calendar Auto function. Now this function bases the start and end dates on the minimum and maximum dates across your entire model, except for dates that are generated by calculated columns or tables or measures. And it returns a table with a column of dates, one for each day in the date range. If you want a table based on a fiscal period, you can specify the start month number for your fiscal year. Now my fiscal year starts in January, so I can leave this blank, but if yours started in July, then you type in a 7. So I'll delete that and we'll press enter to create the calendar table. Now the calendar auto function always starts with the first day of the calendar year or fiscal year, and it ends at the last day of the calendar year or fiscal year. And obviously if your data spans multiple years, then it's going to start at the first day of the first year and end at the last day of the last year in your data set. Now, word of warning, my model only has dates from the 1st of January to the 31st of December 2020, so this function will work fine for me. But if your model contains dates of birth or other dates outside the range that you want to report on, then you'd be better off using the calendar function, because this allows you to specify a start and end date. So now that I have my calendar dimension table, I need to create relationships between the fact tables. Let's move it down here, and we'll left click and drag each of the date fields up to the calendar dimension field. Now before I build the visuals, I want to set some formatting, and I like to do this in the data view. So for example, my actual column, I want to set that so that it has a comma separator. Let's repeat that for the budget and for the forecast. That way, the formatting will automatically feed through to my visuals. I won't have to manually do it again for each one. The other thing I want to do is set the data category for my country fields. And this is just going to help Power BI recognize that this data is a country, so that when I plot it in a map chart, it's going to know what to do with it. So I've got one more here, and then finally country in the regions table. Notice that I now have an icon beside each of those country fields. Okay, I'm ready to start building my visuals. Let's go to the report view. Now in Power BI Desktop, we can use the built-in AI to ask a question of our data. For example, let's say I wanted to see the actual year-to-date versus the full year budget displayed in a gauge chart. And if I'm happy with what the Q&A tool returns, I can commit that as a standard visual. I'll make it a little bit smaller and I'll move it down. The other thing I want to do is in the formatting, I want to edit the title. So we'll just say actual year-to-date versus full year budget. And with that, I've created my first visual without even needing to know how to use Power BI. Now you can also insert visuals by simply selecting the visual type from the gallery here. The next one I want is a KPI, so let's select that. And then all I need to do is select fields from my field list. And notice I've just checked the date field and it's automatically detected that it's probably going to go on the trend axis because it's a date field. The indicator will be the forecast and the target will be the budget. Let's move it down the bottom, that's where it's going to live. Now I need to make some changes in the settings for the KPI because it's assumed that a positive variance is good, but remember these are costs, so when costs are higher than budget, that's certainly not good. We can do this in the settings. So under goals, at the bottom I want distance direction decreasing is positive, and in the color coding I want low is good. Now the numbers displayed in the KPI are those of the last period in the data. In this case, this is December's variance, and the error chart behind represents the variance trend for the whole year. The next visual I want is the line chart. So let's move this over here. We'll make it a bit wider. So this one I want, again, the date for the axis. I don't want it down to the day level of detail, month is enough. And I want the actual, budget, and forecast. Let's drill down on the data until we get to month level. Okay, let's make some formatting changes here. So in the x-axis, I don't need the title. I think it's self-explanatory that those are months. Likewise, for the y-axis, we'll turn the title off. And then I'll turn the title off altogether. I think this chart is fairly self-explanatory. Doesn't need a title because the legends are explaining what the data represents. Now the next visual shows the running total. So I need to write some measures using the Power Pivot formula language called DAX. I need 3 running total measures, one for actuals, one for budget, and one for forecast. We'll do the actuals one first. Click on the ellipsis and select a new measure. And the formula bar opens, ready for me to enter my measure. So this one will be called actual RT for running total. We'll use the calculate function to filter the data. We want to sum the actuals and filter all selected dates in the calendar table where dates is on or after the max date in the actuals table, and the sorting direction to calculate the running total is descending. So all I need to do is hit the check mark, and if you look at the field list you can see I now have a new field in the actuals table, and notice the icon is the calculator, and this indicates that this is an explicit measure, meaning a measure that I've written myself with a DAX formula. Now all I need to do is rinse and repeat this formula for the other tables. So I'm just going to highlight it and Control-C to copy, and then we'll add the budget one. And I just need to change where it says actual to budget. And lastly, another one for forecast. And I'm ready to insert the visual. So this is going to be an area chart. Let's bring it down here and we'll line it up so it's the same size as the line chart above. So this one's going to have the actual running total, the budget running total, and the forecast running total, and we need to see that across dates. Let's drill down. Let's do some tidying up in the formatting. I don't need the axis titles again, I think it's self-explanatory, so let's turn them off. And for the title itself, I'll just change this to, say, running total. Now this title is a bit bold with the black font, so let's tone it down with the shade of grey, and we'll make it a little smaller. Okay, for the next visual I need some more measures, but this time I'm going to have Power BI write them for me. I need to calculate the budget versus forecast and the budget versus forecast percentage difference. So from the ellipsis beside budget, I want new quick measure. In the dialog box, I can choose the type of calculation. So here I want to do a subtraction. The base value is going to be the budget, and the value to subtract is the forecast. I'll click OK. And if you look in the formula bar, you can see Power BI has written the formula for me. So let's just change this to say budget v forecast. Press enter to commit that. And you can see again, it's in the field list. Let's make that a bit wider. And I need one more, which is the budget v forecast percent. So we'll do another quick measure. This one is going to be percentage difference. The base field is the forecast. And the value to compare is the budget. I'll click OK. And there it is in the field list. If I click on it, you can see the formula that Power BI has written for me. It's a little more complicated than the last one. Let's give it a better name. And now I'm ready to build the next visual. So this one is going to be a clustered column and line combo chart. There it is there. Bring it down here below the other charts. It's going to be the same width. And this one is going to have the date in the shared axis. Now I don't want this one to use the default hierarchy. I just want it to use the date field. And then I'm going to have column values are the budget v forecast, and the line values are the budget v forecast percent. Let's do some formatting. I'm going to turn off the title for the x-axis, and in the y-axis I want to turn on the secondary axis label. So we're going to show secondary axis, and I want to also show the title for that secondary axis. We'll keep scrolling down. Here I want to turn the title off, and we're done. Next I'm going to use the clustered bar chart, so let's add one of those. They're going to fill this space over here. There's going to be 3 of these charts, so once I build one I can copy it. Let's tidy up this list. I'm just going to collapse them all. Alright, this one is going to use region in the axis, and then the budget v forecast percent in the values. I want to sort this in ascending order. We'll do some formatting. I'm going to turn off the title for the y-axis. And in the x-axis, I want to turn off the title and I want to turn off the axis because I'm going to add data labels. And for the data colors, I'd like to color code the negative values. So let's go in and we'll do some conditional formatting. Click the function icon for data colors. So this is going to be formatted by rules based on the budget v forecast percent. So where the value is greater than or equal to 0% and less than or equal to 0 number, we're going to give it a shade of red. We'll add a new rule for the positive values. So where the value is greater than or equal to 0 number, less than or equal to 100%, it'll get a shade of grey. We'll give it a slightly darker shade. I'll click OK, and now you can see my visual has the negative values color coded in a shade of red, reddish orange, and the positive in grey. Let's also make some changes to the title because it's a bit bold. So let's change the font color to a shade of grey and we'll make it a bit smaller. And let's abbreviate this. So just be budget v forecast percent. It's obvious it's by region. We don't need to point that out as well in the title. All right, so this visual is done. With it selected, I'm going to Control C to copy, Control V to paste. I'm just going to move it down and we'll modify this one. So the next one is using the cost elements. So let's add that to the fields. So I want the cost element group. I'm going to add it to the axis and then I'm going to delete region. And that way my conditional formatting has carried over. I don't need to reapply it. So let's copy this one, Control V to paste. And we might make this one a bit smaller because it hasn't got as many items in the vertical axis as these two do. So these ones need a bit more space. And this one's going to be by IT area. So in departments, let's add it to the axis and then delete cost element group. The next thing I want to do is add a slicer for the region, and that's this icon here. We'll simply check the region box. Now, by default, it gives us a checklist, but I want a drop down. It just takes up less space, so I can squish it down in there. Now, because my actuals only span so many months, I'd like a card in the top left, just calling out what the period is year to date that this report is based on. So you can do that, adding a card visual, which is this one here. Now, I need to add a measure for this. So let's add one to the actuals table. This is going to be called year to date month. So I'm using the format function to format the maximum date in the actuals table. And I'm formatting it with MMMYYYY, and I'm concatenating year to date to the end. So press enter. Let's add that to the visual. Now it's a little bit big, so let's go and format it. I'll turn the category off, and in the data label, let's reduce the size of it down to about 38. What I want it to do is fit on one line, so actually let's go a bit smaller. Okay, there we go. So this report is done. You'll notice I've lost my actual line in this line chart. There seems to be a bit of a bug in my version of Power BI at the moment. So if I remove it and add it back in, it comes back. Now the next thing I want to do is change the color theme. You'll find this on the View tab of the ribbon. In the gallery here we can choose from a different theme. Or we can browse for themes that we may already have on our PC. We can look for new themes in the public theme gallery, or we can customize the current theme. Now I've already created a theme, so let's browse to it. It's here, it's called Solar M, and it's a JSON file. So let's load that. The theme was imported, and you can see it's changed the colors in all of my visuals. And again, the pesky line chart has lost its actual value. Okay, now this one down here, I'm going to make some changes to the colors just to differentiate them from the actual figures and the budget figures, because this is budget v forecast and budget v forecast percent. These aren't actuals, which are pink up here. So I want to make sure that they're different. So let's go and change that. We'll make the budget v forecast percent line this dark purple, and this one here, this shade. Now I'll give this sheet a name. We'll call it headline. because it gives an overview of the IT spend across all areas of the business. So now that my first report is ready, I can use the built-in interactive features to cross-filter and highlight the data. And personally, I think this is one of the most amazing features in Power BI. If you want to understand the movement from one period to the next, Power BI Pro and Premium users can right-click and use the Analyze tool to explain the increase or decrease. Here it gives me a waterfall chart showing the components contributing to the change by cost element. And if I scroll down, I've got some different charts. This one's by cost element group, IT department, department manager, IT area, and so on. And below each chart, I can choose a different type of chart. So the default is the waterfall, but we can look at it based on a scatter chart, stacked column, and even a ribbon chart. Now this feature is still in preview, so it may look different when you come to try it out. Let's move on. I'll add another sheet for my regions report. The first visual here is a clustered bar chart, so let's add that. This one is going to be by region, and I want the actuals and the budget. Let's do some formatting. I'm going to turn off the title for the y-axis. It's fairly self-explanatory. I'm going to do the same for the x-axis, and I'm going to turn the x-axis off altogether because I'm going to add data labels. Let's change the data colors, make the budget the grey shade, which is in keeping with the visuals on the headline sheet. So I'll make this a little bigger. Now the next visual is actually this one here from the headline figures sheet. So I'm just going to Control-C to copy, and I'm going to paste it in here. Let's bring it over and we'll make it the same height. Next, I'm going to add some matrix tables. Now these are a bit like pivot tables that we have in Excel. So here I want IT area in the rows, regions in the columns, and the values are going to be the budget v forecast. The formatting, I'm going to apply some conditional formatting. I'd like to see icons. Let's go into the advanced controls. So the rules are based on the budget v forecast. What I want to do is just highlight negative variances with a red dot and positive with a green dot. So we'll change the rules down here. If a value is greater than or equal to 0% and is less than 0 number, then this is going to be negative. So let's give it a red dot. And if the value is greater than or equal to 0 number and less than or equal to 100%, then that's going to get a green dot. That means we don't need this rule. I'll click OK. And now we have our conditional formatting set. So let me copy this table and paste it in again. I'll drag it down below. I'm just going to modify it. And this time, instead of IT area, I want cost element group. So I'm just going to drag the cost element into the rows and then delete the IT area. That way my conditional formatting stays intact. Let's give it a bit more space, and then we'll make this one the same size. And let's make this column wider so that they're lined up closer together. And we can give Europe's column a little bit more space as well. Okay, that will do. I think you get the idea with the formatting. All right, the next visual is going to be this filled map. So we'll pop it up here. Let's give it a bit more space. And here I want to look at the actual costs by country. Now at the moment everything's the same shade, so let's go in and give our data colors some conditional formatting. So here we want the color scale based on the sum of actual. The lowest value will give it this shade of purple, and the highest value will give it this darker shade. So I'll click OK, and now we get a better feel for the size of the data, with the USA being by far the highest values. And the last visual for this report page is a scatter chart. So let's pop it in the space here. This one we want the country in the legend, and then we want budget v forecast in the x-axis and budget v forecast percent in the y-axis. And for the bubble size, we'll use the forecast. So from the scatter plot here, we can see that USA has the largest cost by far, And while it's nearly 1.7 million over budget, that's less than 1% over. So it's not doing too badly in the scheme of things. Whereas down here we've got Spain that's 17% over budget with a 300,000 overspend. Right, let's edit this visuals title. We'll just call it Budget v Forecast. And let's tone down the color. We'll give it a shade of grey. While I'm here, let's fix this one so that its title is also not so black. Okay, the last visual I want to show you is called the Decomposition Tree. It's this icon here in the visual gallery. Let's make it really big. It needs lots of room. Now, the Decomposition Tree is available to Power BI Pro and Premium users, and it enables you to conduct root cause analysis. For example, we might want to understand the factors contributing to the adverse variance to budget by visualizing data across multiple dimensions. Power BI automatically aggregates the data so we can drill down into dimensions in any order. I can click on the plus beside Budget v Forecast, and I can use Power BI's AI to find the biggest contributor to the negative variance by choosing low value. Now, by default, it sorts in descending order, but since I'm interested in negative variances, I want to sort in ascending order. Here I can see the administrative cost element is the biggest contributor. And again, we can continue to use the AI to drill down and find the next low value. So we can see USA, and let's continue in the cost element group administrative, as you'd expect, because the cost element is administrative. And lastly, into the department. Now, the colored dotted line indicates I've used the Power BI AI to find the next level. I can click on external labor, and the decomposition tree updates to show me the factors contributing to this variance. And I can continue to choose different paths to analyze and understand the causes of the variance. Let's delete these, and I'll choose the fields myself. So this time I want to see by cost element group, and then we'll drill into administrative, into the cost element, and then I want to know which country, and obviously it's returning the same results as you'd expect it would, but I'm seeing it in the order that I've specified. So again, I can choose labor, and this time I can say, well, there's a positive variance in internal labor, let's have a look at that. You can see USA is contributing to the positive variance for internal labor, but it's also contributing to the negative variance for external labor. So as you can see, the decomposition tree is an amazing tool for understanding contributing factors to your business performance. So now that my reports are built, it's time to publish them to the Power BI service. And the Power BI service is a web-based online portal for publishing and securely sharing your Power BI reports and dashboards. I'm going to save my file, and then on the Home tab, I can click Publish. I can choose the workspace. I'm going to put it in this one called Demos. It's all done. So now I can switch over to Power BI and we can view the reports online. So here I am in my web browser. I'm in my Demos workspace, and if I scroll down, you can see I now have a data set for IT spend, and I have reports for IT spend. So let's take a look at those. It's opened up on the last report I had. Let's go to the headline. Here I can interact with the reports in the Power BI service just like I can using Power BI Desktop. You can see the cross-filtering and highlighting all works in exactly the same way. If I want to focus in on a specific visual, I can go into focus mode, and that will open it in a larger window. On the right, I have the filters pane, or I can continue to filter down into this data. If we go back to report view, you'll notice the filters pane is available here as well. So as a user, I can continue to add filters, but any filters I add here won't be saved. I can also click on the ellipsis and show this as a table, and then I get the chart at the top, and below I get the actual values that are displayed in that chart. And just like in Power BI Desktop, Pro and Premium users can use the Analyze tool to understand what the cause is of any increases or decreases. Again, we're going to get the waterfall charts that help us understand that movement from one period to the next. Now, if you want to provide a high-level view of your data and restrict users' ability to add more filters or export the data, then you can create a dashboard. On the ellipsis here, I can pin this whole visual to a dashboard. It's going to pin the live page, and that means any changes to the report will be visible in the dashboard as well. So I can create a new dashboard, we'll call it IT Spend, and pin live. And then if I scroll up, you can see it's created the dashboard. If we look on the left-hand side, I can see it here. I can navigate to it. Notice here we get a more streamlined view. There's no filters options on the right-hand side, but the cross-filtering and highlighting works in the same way. There's no right-click menu, so there's no option to analyze. But at the top, we can ask questions about our data using the built-in Q&A. There's a list of suggested questions to choose from, or you can ask your own. For example, let's say I wanted to know infrastructure forecast by department manager, or even infrastructure budget v forecast by department manager. And if I like this visual, I can pin it to my dashboard as well. Let's go back to the reports and we'll talk about sharing. Power BI Pro and Premium users have the option to share. We can click on Report, and in the right hand side we get the sharing pane where we can enter the email addresses of those users that I want to share my report with. The nice thing about sharing using the Power BI service is that your data is secure. You can modify the settings below to restrict what recipients can do. And those you've shared your reports with must log into their own Power BI account to view them. Of course, if your data isn't confidential, then you can choose to embed the report either in SharePoint Online, a website or portal like an intranet, or even just to a public website. Now, there's a lot more to the Power BI service and sharing reports and dashboards than I can cover in this video, but hopefully you can see that Power BI gives you far more control over who can see and share your reports than you can achieve with Excel, for example. So the next thing you're going to want to do is update your reports. And the procedure for refreshing the data depends on the location of your source data. And again, that's a vast topic, so I can't cover everything in this video. I've set up a personal gateway between my PC and the Power BI service, which enables Power BI to securely communicate with my PC to get new data. So all I need to do is add the July data to my folder on my PC. So let's go and grab that. I've got some July data here. I'll copy it. Let's pop it in this folder here. So you can see there's now a new file. Let's go back to the Power BI service. Down in the data sets, all I need to do is click on IT Spend and then choose Refresh Now. So the data's been refreshed, but my report doesn't reflect it yet. All I need to do here is refresh the report, clicking the refresh icon here. And if you keep an eye on the area chart, you'll see that July data is added. We can see the tooltip shows me that I now have an actual for July. And if we go and have a look at the dashboard, you'll see that it also contains the July data. And that means those you've shared your dashboards and reports with will also see that updated data. Now, I've triggered the refresh manually here, but you can schedule automatic refreshes to run at specific times. So if we look at the data set, you can see there I have the option to schedule a refresh. And in here I can set the frequency. Now, before we wrap up, there are some things I want to point out and reiterate. The visualizations and the related data set have been published to the cloud and they reside in the secure Power BI service. Now, this may be an issue for some companies, so I cover the alternatives in my course. If you want to share your reports and dashboards, you and those you share them with require a Power BI Pro license, which is currently US $10 per person. When you share a dashboard, those you share it with have access to the same reports and underlying data, but they can't save any changes unless you allow them to. This access to the underlying data allows them to dig into the data and find answers to their own questions. Now, if you want to restrict access to data based on a user's role, for example, you want each regional manager to only see their region, then you need to use row-level security, which I also cover in detail in my Power BI course. The other thing to bear in mind for Excel users is that the same Power Query and Power Pivot tools we have in Excel are used in Power BI. So if you already know these tools, then you're off to a head start. But if you're one of the millions of users who still has a version of Excel that's not compatible with these tools, then you don't have to miss out any longer, since they come free with the Power BI desktop application. So now you can get your Power Query and Power Pivot skills up to speed, and when your company eventually upgrades your version of Excel, you'll be way ahead of the curve. Well, I hope you're excited to give Power BI a go. If you'd like to get up to speed with Power BI, Power Query and Power Pivot, please consider my courses. You'll find a link to them in the video description. And if you'd like to have a go at building these reports yourself, you can download the files for this lesson from the link here. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more. And why not share it with your friends who might also find it useful. Thanks for watching.